we start? Thank you. Before I open the hearing for the Barnstable Conservation Commissions, I would like to ask George to do a roll call for the quorum purpose.
Shampoo.
Present.
Morin.
Present.
Lee.
Present.
Hearn.
Present.
Foster.
Present.
Abadili.
Present.
Gilmore present. Administrator Darcy Carley.
Present.
Staff member Kim Kavanaugh.
Present.
We are all present tonight, Mr. Chairman. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Happy New Year. This is 2023. I don't know what happened to 2022. It's just gone so fast. Acting under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and Law Chapter 237 of the Code of Town of Barnstable, the Barnstable Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, January the 3rd, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. for the applications of Cape Cod Village Condominiums, Joan Ahern, Jay and Bessie James, Kevin McShay, the trustees of reservations, Mac A and Toby S. Collins, Mac A and Toby S. Collins, Alicia Fex, trustee, 249 Sepier Road Realty Trust, John and Pamela Layton, Stephen and Beth McFarland. The hearing will be held remotely as televised on Channel 18. The plans and application are on file and may be reviewed by scheduling appointment by sending email requests to Darcy Curley at 230 South Street, Hyannis. This meeting is being recorded and transmitted by the Information Technology Department of the Town of Barnstable on Channel 18. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, anyone else desiring to make such a recording or transmissions, please let Channel 18 know I know. Hearing none. This evening's hearing agenda is posted on the town's website. On the agenda, next to each application is the amount owed to the Town of Barnstable for the cost of advertisement. Please send your checks to Conservation Division at 230 South Street before the hearing. Remote participations. The Conservation Commission's public hearing will be held by remote participations as a result of an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed by the Lieutenant Governor on July 16, 2022, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Remote public access to this hearing shall be provided in the following manner. 1, the hearing will be televised via Channel 18. Second, real-time public comment can be addressed to the Conservation Commission utilizing the Zoom link 824-2070-2463 or use the toll-free phone number 888-475-4499 as shown on the agenda. The public can also email the comments to darcy.curley@town.barnstable.ma.us at least 8 hours prior to the hearing. Please note, under the continuance tonight, the applicants for the Christian Camp Meeting Association has requested for a third continuance without testimony to February the 14th, 2023. We have 4 RDA tonight. The first one is Cape Cod Village Condominiums, stormwater management maintenance for an existing stormwater wetland systems at Harbor Point Road, Comaquid, as shown in the assessors maps 352 parcel 035. Is Roger here? Roger?
You're on mute, Roger.
Down
Roger,
at the bottom of your screen.
Lower left-hand corner, I think.
Yep,
I got
lower left-hand corner. Yep.
Okay. That look good?
Yes.
Yep.
Now we can hear
Age
you.
challenged. Age challenged.
You can
Would you
start.
like me to? Would
Yes.
you like me to walk you through this RDA?
Yes.
Okay. I represent Cape Cod Village Condominium. Our president of the managing board, Amy Collins, is also present in the dialogue. The purpose of us submitting this RDA is to see if we can clarify 40 years of activity down at at the village that seems to be consistently lost through time as we move through various periods. I'm trying to demonstrate that we have a very limited wetland on the property, and it is actually a constructed wetland in compliance with the Stormwater Mitigation Manual. So I have attempted to try to get this all packaged together so that we can try to tie up a lot of loose ends. We have a view cut permit, which we acquired in 2002, that we've been using to trim the vegetation in the bottom part of the property where it says the existing pond is, or the existing wetland, and over to the right to the swale. Now, we've been doing this every year, but every other year we seem to have confusion about this wetland. And the truth is that this wetland was an inadvertent construct that when we put in our tight tank system in 1989-90, created a depression to the left of the walkway to the beach. That depression is approximately 2 feet deep. And over the years, it has performed actually quite well as a stormwater mitigation structure. In light of the fact that today, stormwater mitigation is a very important component of taking care of our waterways, and having examined this closely, I reverse engineered this to establish, in fact, that it is a stormwater mitigation structure. It is performing correctly, and we need to come up with a maintenance plan so that we can propagate through time what we have to do to keep this all functioning correctly. And what that really is allowing our view cutting permit to apply as it has in the past across the whole piece of the property, so we can keep the vegetation below 4 feet so we get evaporation from the detention infiltration pond. And also we want to keep the vegetation to help move the water out of the pond in the summer with the transpiration of the leaves. The soil conditions down there actually work pretty well on a seasonal basis for the structure, because the groundwater is usually 6 to 8 feet below the surface, and the soils are basically perfect for draining and infiltrating into the wetland. Over to the right, on the other side, is a swale natural that flows right into the estuary, and that's where half of the property's runoff just flows automatically during a peak load storm. So from my point of view, this was really an attempt to try to clarify this, make it workable, create a maintenance plan so that we can do basically 3 things: prune the vegetation without any problem every year, keep mowing the grass, which is one of our best tools for the TSS removal, total suspended solids, and 3, keep and be vigilant about our removal of Phragmites and other invasive species, so we don't clog this thing up, since it's been operating correctly for quite a long time. So the goal here is really just to try to get everything in the same place, get a maintenance plan approved, and just move forward.
Thank you, Roger. I want to get Darcy to make a comment, because we had a discussions, trying to find the additional information that we sent up for the commissioner. So Darcy.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Yep, everything that Roger said, I agree with. He came in, he worked with Ed and myself. We looked at the prior filing, and Roger did send me a revision just before late afternoon that I forward to all the commissioners as a revision to indicate exactly where he wanted that 4-foot height. So we had it for the record. And that sketch is dated today's date. And also he was able to find the document. I was looking in the wrong area. I was looking under an SE3 number, but a determination, which I put up on the screen, that allowed for the 4-foot height cutting. So I don't have a problem with this. I think this is submitted the correct way and ready to move forward.
Thank you, Darcy. Question from the commissioner. Bill?
Yeah, I don't have a problem really with this project at all, but I'm wondering about why you need to trim the trees. I would think that the larger the trees grow, the more mass of the trees, the more transpiration you would have, and therefore the greater capacity of that little zone to sort of rid the area of excess moisture. Why cut it out? Didn't get
Well,
that.
the reason for that is that you get shade, which cuts down on the evaporation, which is also a big component over the summer. You want to get as much sunlight in there as you can. The trees that are causing problems are basically willows, and they do a good job, so we don't want to take them out. They actually will work fine, but they need to be lower to the ground so they're not going to shade during the summer month. That's why we're trying to get these all conforming to the same height.
Thank you. Pete?
Yeah, actually, I'm on the same question as Bill. And Darcy or someone, can you actually pull up that map that shows where that 4-foot height cut is supposed to be? Because I heard verbally across the whole site, but I didn't look at it. So if you could, yes, please point out.
Yep. Yeah, that's the location. It's the existing detention infiltration basin.
So
In fact, if there's, I think the last exhibit I turned in is from the wetlands management plan from the state, which locates the 100-foot buffer. And you can see on that drawing perfectly the little area where the vegetation is between the cottage and the path.
okay, could you show, sir, the exact spot with your arrow where it is you're talking about? Because certainly willow trees are water-hungry plants. They transpire a huge amount of water. And Bill's point, I understand that evaporation is also important, but a good-sized willow just sucks the bejeemies of moisture out of an area. Very, very good at transpiring water.
No, I understand. I agree with you. I'm just worried that over time they'll become out of control, and then we'll have to come back and deal with it individually.
If you allow air movement, so you have some limbing, for instance, so you've got a lot of air movement close to the surface of your land, and then you allow a few trees to grow up, you really get the best of both worlds. You get massive transpiration from a very mature willow tree, and yet you still have evaporation because you're ensuring a lot of air transport in close proximity to the surface of your land and soil. So I think, again, I'm not an expert in this, but I am a scientist, that potentially provides a superior solution. That's just my thoughts.
Right.
Thank you, Pete. Larry?
Thank you. And I'm now doing the conventional way here. Roger, I'm going back to the way this is structured initially by referring to it as a stormwater management maintenance plan, and as opposed to a stormwater mitigation maintenance plan. It may be not any different, I don't know. But let me ask Darcy a question first. Darcy, is there anything about stormwater management that calls for more information than we've been given, or more information that should be filed? I don't want to complicate it. I simply want to know if this is I'm very excited about this project and this property. It's really one of my favorite spots in the north side. So, Darcy, can you help me clarify that before we go any further?
Yes, I believe since this was submitted and recognized as a stormwater management area, those have grown up in the meantime. I would think the commission would allow somebody to continue to do the maintenance in that area. And the commission already approved this to be 4 foot in a prior determination. So basically, they're just trying to put this all into one application. You would be, a lot of times with pruning, vista pruning, let's say, but something it comes in as a determination, the commission has allowed that to continue continue under a determination. So it would be basically kind of if you didn't approve it this way, a negative determination with the 4-foot request, you would be taking that back from the original determination.
Yeah, I don't want to do
And
that.
I think he was just trying to, I would hate to see that this is now going to cause a problem because he was doing his due diligence to submit all of the information. And I apologize, it just came to the last minute that we finally found that application between this and me being being sick and everything. I have finally had a time to contact Roger this afternoon. So,
okay. So my only other question, and it can be for Roger or Darcy or anybody else, I really want to understand precisely what this request is asking for. Roger, you gave us sort of an opening statement, but maybe you can clarify it. Are we?
Sure.
Will that help you if you?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Let me just take your original question and explain a little more. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a stormwater regulations and requirements that are now being enforced across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and each municipality is implementing it differently depending on their interest and how far along they are in the whole process. What happens is today, in order to construct things in these towns, you have to actually submit a stormwater mitigation plan that is approved by both the Department of Public Works and the Conservation Commission before you can proceed with a building permit or any new structure. So in this particular case, this was actually an inadvertent stormwater mitigation structure that actually performed quite well. And then currently, it's now really falls under this new criteria for regulation. So one of the requirements as part of your plan is you're supposed to have a maintenance plan so that going forward in time, you're taking care of it, you're making sure that it's functioning and performing its service. So, you know, from my point of view, that was the challenge, was I had to reverse engineer this so that I could determine, and I put it on all the drawings, and that major drawing actually would be a submittal to the state and to the DPW if I was designing this from scratch. But what I'm trying to do is grandfather it, because there's no reason to upset the topology. It just needs to be taken care of. So that was why I've been calling it a stormwater mitigation maintenance plan rather than just a stormwater mitigation plan.
Okay, that makes plenty of sense. Let me ask you a quick question. If this is approved, and I suspect the attitude of the commission is that we want to approve it, do you still have to take it to state or other authorities for them to review it as well?
No, only if I was going to have a change in this, or I wanted to redesign it, then I would have to start from scratch, which is not what we want to do. This truly is a grandfather environment where I'm trying to document once and for all what it is, how it works, and why we should take care of it.
Okay. That's fine. I don't really have any more questions because I started off trying to request information from Darcy, and she understandably wasn't available, but sometimes the information I request is irrelevant. So in this particular case, I appreciate your explanation, and let's see what other questions may be answered by Bill Hearn and others. Thanks a lot, Roger.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor this because we have a long agenda. And I don't oppose this project, and I think it's perfectly acceptable as a stormwater maintenance project. However, I feel I want to mention the fact that we had a meeting like about, 6 weeks ago, or maybe it was a couple months ago, and we were talking about the impacts of stormwater flooding over near Seaview Ave, that road behind Seaview Ave. And there was a consultant that, the neighborhood was all up in arms. You don't want to clear the trees out, blah, blah. And they had a consultant. And the guy ended up saying, each one of these trees transpires. And I remember the amount of water And as a PhD biologist, I didn't realize how much trees transpire. And so I only just want to say to the people, the gentleman who's pursuing this this permit or whatever, you might want to consider trimming the trees. Look into how much those trees transpire. I don't have the numbers, I don't have the science, but they transpire. I do know a ton of water, and trimming them may be counter to your objective. That being said, if you want to trim them, whatever. But you actually may do better not. I would recommend looking into that. That's all.
Great. No, I will look into that. I promise. The goal here is to make it functional, and if we can improve it that way, and improve it with trimming, definitely I'll look into it.
Anyway,
because the maintenance of the stormwater feet of the facility is important. How to do it, there's many factors that you can do, and reducing the cutting and some of this, increasing the transpiration of stuff. That's the part of the equations that you can play around with. So be aware.
Right.
Any other public comments? Any public comment? Channel 18.
Ann Kennedy has her hand up.
Oh, who? Ann?
Ann.
Yep. Remember me, Tom?
Yeah. No, I cannot see your hand.
I'm in a butter, and I just want to support this project as something that basically Roger is trying to codify something that the Conservation Commission has given them permission to do in the past. And this is, to me, a very positive project to get it down on paper, and so that everybody will be clear on how it's to be followed. As an abutter and someone that uses the beach there all the time, I think it's a good project and should be supported. So that's
Thank you, Ann. Channel 18, any more public comment?
Seeing none.
Could I have a motion to approve this project as a negative determination?
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Good luck, Roger.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep. The second RDA is Joan Ahern. Upgrade failed cesspool to Title V system at 640 Pompanesett Road, Contuit, as shown on the assessors map 006, parcel 018. Darren?
Hi, good evening. Darren Meyer here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. What we have here is a simple upgrade from a failed cesspool. It's an existing 3-bedroom dwelling on a 20,000 square foot lot. We have a coastal bank and a salt marsh at the edge of the property where it abuts Shoestring Bay. Unfortunately, due to the plumbing in the basement, we aren't able to move everything into the front yard. So we've got to deal with the existing plumbing, which leaves us with the tank about 50 plus or minus feet away from the coastal bank. The leaching, we are able to move down to the front yard and maintain a setback of 104 feet. The cesspool will be filled by hand, and all areas of disturbance will be returned to existing conditions, which is a mixture of grass and weeds and whatnot. It is finished. We're not tearing out any vegetation other than kind of weeds and grass. We have straw bales or there for mitigation purposes when we work in the backyard. So happy to answer any questions on that.
Any question from the commissioner?
Yeah, I do.
Bill?
I'm just wondering what the status of the sewering is for that neighborhood, the long-term prospect for it.
Pompanesett, well, I can answer that question. Pompanesett is like between 20 and 30 years old.
So there is a plan to do something, right?
20 to 30 years old.
Yeah.
We won't be here, Bill, to see it.
No, but if there was not going to be anything, the whole concept of IA, alternatives for removing nitrogen, I just wanted to make a pitch that perhaps the owner might want to consider spending a few extra bucks in order to reduce nitrogen input into Shoestring Bay. And
I mean, I am sympathetic to that, and I haven't discussed it with the owner because we felt that conventional system fit within the setbacks, and also we're a good 20 feet above the waterway. It allows for what I feel proper filtration of those issues, but I understand the concern for sure.
If I might, the nitrogen basically goes straight into the watershed. It does not fill the Title V, and it's been in the press practically daily, certainly weekly, and that's what this whole sewering thing is about. Is that the nitrogen from your septic system from a Title V runs directly downhill in a matter of days, and so therefore you really are contributing to nitrogen. So therefore, putting in an innovative system, and again, we don't have the authority to say, no, you must do that, but I would encourage you to at least, consider that.
Yeah.
Okay, I will discuss it with the owner.
Any other question from the commissioner, Larry?
My question, Darren, is that you're putting in a tank, a tight tank, I guess you call it, fairly close to the top of right at the margin of the 50-foot buffer. But doesn't everything flow away from that towards the leaching field and none of it? Isn't it a protected structure so that it won't leak out there? It just flows from there into the leaching field?
Yes,
and
the tank itself is a solid tank that contains the effluent, and then from there it will gravity feed over to the leaching system.
And you also are dealing with an existing cesspool that is really within the 50-foot buffer, and so that's going to be removed. That's going to go away, and so that won't be there anymore. Is that correct?
Right. That'll be pumped and filled in as part of this project.
Okay. All right.
So it certainly is an upgrade from the current situation.
I think it's a significant upgrade, but you're dealing with admittedly, you're dealing with a small lot, and you're dealing with other factors that you seem to have addressed as openly as you possibly can. So that's my reaction. So thank you, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commissioner? None. Public channel 18. Any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
Could I have a motion to
Aye.
approve this project as negative determination?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call.
Tim Pool,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lauren,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
The third RDA is J and Betsy James. Elevate existing homes and adds to existing foundation. Reset homes on foundations and remodel with no change in footprint at 642 South Main Street, Centerville, as shown in Assessors Map 186, Parcel 041. Walter?
Hi, good evening. Steve Bobola. Walter is a general partner in the company, Sandollar Customs. We're representing the Jameses this evening. How are you?
Not bad.
So first, let me point out in the description of the project at the very tail end, you had mentioned no change to the footprint. There is actually a very slight change to the footprint. So within the green outline, which is the main footprint of the building, there's a small portion, as you can see, indicated by a hard line arrow on the plan, that connects the garage to the home. In the remodeled plan, we're planning on detaching the home from the garage You can see that that 50-foot buffer line kind of intersects right at that particular point. The lot's fairly level. We're seeking not to take out the foundation that is existing, but to reinforce it and elevate it, and then reset the home. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I could. Oh, and one more point is that we're planning on not disturbing the garage itself, which is within the 50-foot, but it could potentially at some point be upgraded in terms of just cosmetics, roofing, siding, trim, potentially.
Okay. Question from the commissioner. Larry?
Thank you. Want to get your name to just testified. Anyway, how are you going to be able to do this work without getting machinery in to elevate the house? Aren't you going to have to get under the house and raise it? And if so, you can do that without machinery?
So the existing home, as it currently sits, the foundation level is up probably about 18 inches or so above grade. So it'd be very simple. It's a block foundation as it is now. It'd be very simple to knock out some blocks. And then we can bring in our equipment because we have a corner lot. So we have access from 2 roadways in which we would not have to get within that 50-foot buffer.
Okay.
Admittedly, we have to be within the 100-foot buffer, but we can effectively stay away from that 50-foot buffer.
So your reference to no machinery being used is within the 50, but not within the 50 to 100.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it depends on your definition of machinery. Like in terms of like heavy equipment, ground earth moving type things. I mean, we're gonna have to bring a vehicle up the side road to get the beams in place. And then of course we'll be doing, hand cribbing and jacking to elevate the structure.
Right.
So there's not a, there's no heavy equipment or moving equipment assumed to being used on this project.
All I'm trying to do is just not have your hands tied as to what you need to do. I don't want there to be any misinterpretation of the way you worded it. You seem to be comfortable and confident with what you're doing. I may be the only one raising the question. That was my concern as I looked at it. I thought, how are you going to do that without, we've watched other properties on the Cape within the last 15 to 18 months that have been raised. And we know that they have to use a lot of equipment. So whatever you choose to do, if you feel you need to do something different, I suggest you keep the staff informed so they can advise if it needs to be modified. Otherwise, I'm fine with it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Louise?
You're raising the area that's surrounded in green, right?
That's correct.
So I may be missing something. I don't know, maybe it's my eyesight, but I look at this drawing and I don't see that as being within the 50. It's between the 50 and 100.
That's what he said.
No, it's between 50 and 100.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
I didn't think that's what he said. I thought he said in the 50.
Yeah.
Whatever. All right, so fine. That's good.
Any other question from the commissioner? Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
Could I have a motion to approve this project as a negative determination?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Moran.
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
The last RDA of tonight is Kevin McShade with the pruning at 116 Bay Road, completed and shown on the assessors map 007, parcel 021. Arlene?
Good evening. Arlene Wilson, AM Wilson Associates here for the McShays. the commission has seen this site a couple of times before, and I hope this is the last piece in their landscaping plan. So what they have decided is that they would like to have a 30-foot wide view shed with the bank access stairs on the south side of that. So it'll be easy for everybody in the future to determine where they were supposed to be working. And the vista pruning will be done in accordance with the commission's requirements. Occasional limbing, not more than 25% of the growth on any particular tree, and will be done in concert with staff. I imagine that that's going to fall to your new young man in the office, but it'll be done by professional arborists. Anybody who's been out there knows that this bank is very steep, and it is not the kind of site that anybody, any homeowner can work on without winding up in the hospital, I think. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question from the commissioner. None. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
Could I have a motion to approve this project as a negative determination?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Byrne,
Aye. Yes. Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Abadili,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
We have 6 NOI tonight. The first one is the trustee of reservations. Proposed realignment of an existing parking layout to improve access and circulations to meet ADA compliance for accessibility, additional improvement including green stormwater infrastructure systems, buffer restorations, and new landscaping design at 675 Main Street, Ulsterville, as shown on Assessors Map 141, Parcel 038. This is a project that is helped by Horsley Witten, and I have to recuse myself. So I'm passed on to our Vice Chair, Louise Foster, to conduct this hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's see, Amy Ball is here representing the applicant. Are you here?
I am. Thank you. For the record, Amy Ball, senior ecologist with the Horsley Witten Group. The applicant is actually here. We'll be doing the majority of the presentation. That is Elizabeth Carey Sewell from the Trustees of Reservations.
Good evening to the commission. Thank you, Amy. My name is Elizabeth Carey Sewell, and I'm a registered landscape architect and project manager with the trustees. We're here in front of you tonight as the trustees is proposing a plan for restoration and expansion of the gardens and improvements to parking and circulation at Armstrong Kelly Park in Osterville. Armstrong Kelly Park is the oldest privately owned public park on Cape Cod, an 8.5 acre park. It's been in operation since 1930, although the trustees has only recently started working on the park after merging with the Cape Cod Horticultural Society at the end of 2011. Since that time, the trustees has been investing in the Armstrong Kelly Park as one of our community and horticulturally focused public garden properties. To date, we've made significant horticultural investments, including beefing up vegetated buffers, new specimen trees, removal of overgrown, invasive, or unhealthy plant material, and then, of course, renewed stewardship of the gardens with a part-time horticulturalist and maintenance staff. Since acquiring the property, we have also worked with the commission to remove a wetland, to remove a boardwalk that was over a wetland. So this is post that project. The scope of work that's in front of you all today is slated to begin in the spring of 2023. It includes improved access, parking, and pedestrian circulation throughout the activated portion of the site, compliance with ADA accessibility, creation of a new circular common green, replacing existing sheds with a garage for maintenance and storage, establishing green stormwater management practices to collect runoff from the access road, parking, and maintenance areas, and then, of course, care for existing specimen plant material and diversification of the plant collection. It may make the most sense for me to share my screen so that we're all looking at the same thing. Does that work, Darcy?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. I'm just going to walk through the plan very quickly here, and then Amy and I will be able to answer any questions the commission may have. So currently there's a curb cut along Main Street that connects to a crushed stone road, dense grade road, that encircles an existing specimen copper beech tree. So this is the primary parking for the park, and folks will drive in here and then park around the circle. They park on the roots of the tree. They park on the lawn. It's a very chaotic and disorganized and sort of unsafe condition. So our primary proposal is to use that existing curb cut and some of the existing road and install a new entry drive that connects that curb cut to a more organized and ADA accessible parking lot. So it's 13 spaces, one ADA handicap parking spot. You can see that this portion of the road is within the 50 to 100 foot wetland buffer here. I'm going to go to our mitigation, our landscape plan. So you can see we've worked out the mitigation square footage planting requirements based on the new dense grade that's going within that 15 to 100 foot setback. So currently the condition here on site is primarily lawn with some specimen tree planting. So the plan is to grub about 5.5 thousand square feet of that existing lawn and plant that out. To jump back to our stormwater component, so we were actually in front of the planning group today for their informal internal site plan review and discuss some of the stormwater aspects with them and the DPW engineer who was on the call. So there's two primary green infrastructure components. The first utilizes an existing low point with the addition of a bioretention pond, which not only works for stormwater function, but helps us with diversification of our plant collections. We're planning to plant this out, use it as an educational tool. And then also a second bioretention area that's off of our parking, and also underground infiltration chambers underneath the parking area. So that's an overview of the project. Are there any questions from the commission?
Commissioners, do you have any questions, comments? John?
Yeah, I assume that's going to be just left as the driveway and the parking lot is just going to be gravel. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's going to continue to be dense grade.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners? Darcy, yes. We have asked DPW to review the stormwater report. What's the status of that?
I will be sending an email tomorrow. Amy helped me find the stormwater management plan or page. So that I'm going to be sending an email tomorrow. So the commission should probably request the applicant agree to a continuance. So we have time for DPW to review it. And I know they were interested in reviewing it anyways. It came up during site plan review.
Okay.
In addition, I would recommend 3-year monitoring reports for the plantings. And let's see and specify, or just to make it clear that the invasive removal will be mechanical, hand only.
Okay, great. Thank you. Channel 18, did you have something else?
Oh, no, I said thank you.
Okay. Channel 18, any public comment? At this point?
Seeing none.
None? Okay, so we need to continue for the stormwater report analysis. Are you requesting that?
Yeah, we would request, maybe they could do January 17th. Hopefully that would be enough time. I'm not sure how long DPW will need to review, but
okay.
I think we should be good, since this being only the 3rd. So if they're good with January 17th, that works for me.
Does that work for you, that date?
I'll defer to Elizabeth on that, but most likely.
Yeah, I think that should be fine.
Okay, great. So could I have a motion to continue this to January 17th?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, roll call, please.
Cavadili.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
He's recused himself.
It's not on this. Warren.
Yes.
And Sampu.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next NOI is Mark A. and Toby S. Collins to replace and expand the existing timber pier with a seasonal pier at 142 Willow Run Drive, San Diego, as shown on Assessors Maps 210 parcel 068. Chuck?
Yes, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So I have a few projects here in front of you tonight. This one is, I think, fairly straightforward. Let me know when everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see our screen.
Great. So the Chuck Rowland, Sullivan Engineering. I'm representing to Collins tonight in the pier project. So the site consists of about a half acre of land abutting Lake Woquacket. The site is developed with a single family dwelling dated to around 1952. There was also a shed permitted under SE 33834. Sorry, that was an addition, a shed, a pier, and all associated appurtenances. And the wetland resources at the site are land under water bodies and BVW. Like I said before, the project as proposed is to replace and expand the existing timber pier with a seasonal pier. The proposed seasonal aluminum pier will reflect the present Conservation Commission freshwater pier guidelines. The proposed pier is similar in length to the abutting pier. In the off-season, the pier will be stored in a suitable upland area. And the design of the pier incorporates lateral access stairs. So this right here is a zoomed-in view. We have the proposed pier. As you can see, it goes out about as far as the abutting pier to the east. And it's not the only pier in this little cove. There's one off to the west right here. And it's your standard 4 foot wide, 10 foot long pier sections, as you can see right here. I think I got a few more projects in front of you tonight, so I'll just leave it if you have any questions.
Question from the commissioner. Bill?
Yeah, it says that you're expanding the pier, and then it says it's the same length. What?
So we're expanding the existing pier, but we're saying it's the similar length as to what the abutters are. So this is the existing pier right here in the dotted line right here. And this is the proposed pier.
So it's larger than what's there, but consistent with the abutting piers, neighboring piers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, all right.
Any other question from the commissioner? Peter?
Yeah, Chuck, quick question here. You've got a 10 foot by 10 foot float at the end.
It's part of the pier. It's a fixed section. It's not a float.
Okay, so you've got the two side-by-side sections perpendicular to the pier that's coming out from land. Is that how I would read it?
Yep.
Okay. And can you speak as to why you need that group of 3 sections out there? Because it will provide some shading, which then would decrease the amount of submerged aquatic vegetation. So please justify that.
We've kind of incorporated with several of the past freshwater piers. We find it to be better access to get on and off of boats out here because they're only 4 feet wide. So it's just easier to access your boat when you have a little bit more room. So we've been incorporating it with a lot of the freshwater piers that we've had in front of you recently.
Yes, but so for instance, you have an 8-foot section, or you have 8 foot across to provide some stability. But if you had at the end of it, rather than the full 3, you had 2 with a set of parallels out there, you would have an 8-foot section that you could load and unload for. I'm just trying to, you got some shading going on. So again, justify that. Why can't you do it with just 2 sections that are side by side?
We only do have 2 sections, 1 and 2 right here. 1, 2.
But they're perpendicular to the end of it. So
right.
If you rotate one of those 2 so that it is parallel and adjacent to the axis of the pier, then you'd have your 8-foot wide section there for stability. And why aren't you not doing that?
So I'd rather have a little bit longer area so that way we can have about 14 feet of running length in the deeper water. We'd rather have the longer running length to tie boats up.
And
so that's the reason why we go that way. And then we usually have 2 just for, like you said, a little bit better stability, better access on and off the boats.
And the neighboring piers, do they have a similar chunk of shading at the end of their piers, or are they just straight out as what's to be on your plan?
So I'm pretty sure that these are kind of as shown, but they pre-exist any of the Conservation Commission present day requirements. They're just semi-permanent timber piers that you can drive better into the sand, and
yeah,
people usually just leave them in the water all season.
Yeah, anyway, this commissioner likes to see the minimum amount of obtrusion onto our aquatic habitats as possible for the use of a dock. And I just think that you could do this with a 2 instead of 3 at the end. That's just my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Larry?
Pete, let me ask you a question. You're talking about shadowing or shading. Are you talking about the sun hitting the water at the end of the pier and you're concerned about that? Or is it talking about trees and that being the shading you're worried about?
No, so you've got an aluminum surface. It's your dock sections.
Okay.
And you have a total of, each of them are 10 feet, and at the end, 4 feet wide, you have, hold a second, 120 square feet of shading out at the end instead of 80 foot of shading. So that was my point.
Okay, if the 2 they're not floats, the 2 sections at the end had light penetration through that, would that be something
that's not going to work for a pier. That's not going to work.
You don't think it would?
No.
Yeah.
Chuck, that's kind of up to you. I don't know what you think it might work. I would think there'd be some way. I don't know why it wouldn't work, but that's anyway. I'm trying to come up with a way of addressing the concern that you've raised, but also providing what the applicant's requesting, because this is a worthwhile improvement. And the pier immediately to the right, which I think would be the east of this, shows on another plan that there is a significant L to the right at that one. that is about the same size as this one, and that was done in 1992. So clearly that's 30 years ago, but nonetheless. So I think, and this little alcove off of Lake Wequaquet has about 4 or 5 different piers on it. So anyway, I'm just trying to get clarification of that, and so I think we've beaten a dead horse, so to speak.
John?
Pete, I respect where you're coming from, but from a boating point of view, if you put that parallel to that one section, parallel to the last section, then you only got an 8-foot across, and from almost any kind of smaller boat that the Lake Wequaquet would hold, that's pretty narrow. So I can understand why he designed it with it going the way it does and the stability issue. So, and it is, given where it's got now, it's probably an overall an improvement as it is.
So Abel, a boat would not pull in bow first along the side. It would pull in bow perpendicular to the dock. Is that?
Yeah, if he's got, as I understand it, if you move, in order to eliminate one of those sections at the end, which I think was your goal, if you turn it so that it is parallel, so the last section had 2 together, the total width of that section, since they're 4 feet wide, would be 8 feet. So it would give some stability left and right, but in terms of going to the end of that, if they tried to tie up, it would be pretty small. So, you know, I don't know the water depths there. I can't really see them, but I can understand what he was trying to do while respecting what you were also trying to accomplish. I think there's a balance there somewhere.
Thanks, John.
George? Yeah, I agree with what John said, Pete. It really does need that section for stability, and we've approved this a number of times on the lake, this very same design, and it's always been a stability issue in these freshwater areas.
Larry, do you have a second question, or you just forgot to lower your hand?
I appreciate John Abadili and George both bringing up the dock construction value of it. I'm trying to look here and see certain measurements, but I don't know that well, for instance, there's a 30, 29.9 and 30.3. I don't know that that's depth as much as it's just a distance from a certain area. Chuck, what is that? What are those numbers supposed to represent?
So if you look right here, it's a contour 30.
Okay.
And then the observed lake elevation was 32.7. So it's about 2.7 feet deep at the end there.
Okay. All right.
And then the record lake elevation was 34, actually. So it's quite drawn down when I was there taking these shots. So in a typical year, it would be almost 4 feet deep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. No further questions, Tom.
Any other question from the commissioner? None. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
Could I have a motion to approve this application as submitted?
So moved.
Second, and a roll call.
Hearn.
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
Moran.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Lee.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. The next NOI is Mark A. and Toby S. Collins for the same locations to demolish single-family dwelling and construct a new single-family dwelling at 142 Willow Run Drive, Centerville, as shown on the Assessors Maps 210, parcel 068. Chuck?
Chuck Rowland, Sullivan Engineering. Again, I'm representing the Collins. So I'll kind of skip down my narrative a little bit. The project as proposed is to demolish a single-family dwelling, construct a new single-family dwelling with all associated appurtenances. The project will have a reduction of hardscape in the 50-foot buffer with greater separation of hardscape to the flag wetland. Due to the added hardscape in the 50 to 100-foot buffer, native mitigation planting is proposed along the wetland. This will provide a wildlife corridor vegetation buffer along the entirety of the wetland. Stormwater roof drainage will be provided to direct any roof runoff away from the wetland. A work limit will be installed using wattles and a silt fence to prevent temporary construction impacts. Additionally, a waiver is being requested as part of the redevelopment in the 50-foot buffer. Presently part of the existing structure within the 50-foot buffer, and it is being redeveloped in a similar location. So if we go to the plan here, this is the proposed mitigation in the 50-foot buffer. So we're adding some native planting to that area. We have our work limit that's pulled away. And then we have a proposed deck, and this is the existing dwelling, and we've moved it further away on this corner. Similar location as the existing deck, pulled back. They're removing the shed out of the conservation jurisdiction. I'm almost positive a septic question is going to be coming up, and the reason why we are keeping this septic is because they're in the phase 1 sewer expansion, which is happening just down the road. So I can't predict it, but I imagine it's not terribly far behind. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Question from the commissioner. Anyone? Luis?
This is sort of separate from the work on the house, but what's the history of the sand on the beach? The reason I ask is it seemed like it was really pretty loaded with sand to the extent that there was actually kind of a very small but an isolated section of sand that had migrated into the water of the lake. So there was like this tiny little island. And it just seemed like there was so much sand there that it really wasn't contained by the beach area at all. So did they just get a delivery of sand, or what's the story?
I'm not, I was not there during any sand being put on there. As you can see in this photo, this is,
yeah, this is standing in the yard, on the lawn, looking out.
So this is a photo from Article 120.01.22, showing the beach was there when this is the existing pier, to my knowledge. When the existing pier was permitted, this is a photo of the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not privy to any other information other than, to my knowledge, it was there when the last project was permitted.
Maybe we can ask Darcy to look into it, Luis.
Yeah.
Could you look into it, Darcy?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Pete?
Yeah, Chuck, talk to me about the fire pit that you have within the 50.
I can't see a fire pit on this plan.
Oh, it says fire pit just south of ramp, where it says pier and ramp.
You can see it on the plan, Chuck.
Right here. I think that's just the existing fire pit that was located. I don't think that we're asking to put in a fire pit. If you want, I'm happy to take that off the plan.
Good enough. Thank you.
Any other questions on this application on the house board demolition of the existing house. Darcy, for this much of the mitigations, do we need any monitoring report?
No, it'll be fine to be reviewed during the certificate of compliance. With it only being 2 and 3 gallon, I would probably recommend some demarcation, maybe on a revised plan.
Happy to do that as well.
Thank you.
Channel 18, any public comment on this?
I have a question.
Who's this?
Yeah, I'm in a butter.
Okay. What's your name?
Frank Santo Pietro.
Okay.
So my question is,
what's the address? Kim need the informations.
40 Threadneedle Lane.
Okay.
Question I have is this already been permitted, this project?
No. No, this is that part of the permitting process under the concept.
And the shed that is there, that's going to be demolished? Is that it?
Which one are you talking about?
The pre-existing shed?
On my plan, we're showing that this is the existing shed, and we plan on moving it outside of conservation jurisdiction. Right here.
And the new shed, is that going to be a new shed built there, or is that the pre-existing one going to be moved there?
I have it labeled as being relocated, so the existing shed, but if they choose to build a new one, I don't see why they would be restricted on that.
Yeah. Is
this
there
plan is mostly to show that that it will not be located inside of conservation jurisdiction. So conservation typically doesn't mind things of that nature being built outside of their jurisdiction.
Okay, it's good. All right, I think it's a good project.
Thank you. Channel 18, any more public comment?
Seeing none.
Could I have a motion to approve this project subject to receipt of a revised plan showing the demarcation area of the mitigation planting?
So moved.
Second.
And the removal of the fire pit from the plan.
Good point. Good point.
And the removal of the fire pit label on the below the mitigation planting area.
I move that amended motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
Moran.
Aye.
Abadili.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
The next NOI is Alicia Fix, trustee 249 Superior Road Realty Trust, to remove existing pool and clearing for garden at 249 Superior Road, Austerville, as shown on the assessors maps 9095, parcel 015. And is it Chuck or John?
You got me today again.
Okay.
He went home. Chuck Rowland, Sullivan Engineering Consulting. So we kind of have an interesting one here. The project site consists of about 8.5 tenths acres of land in Katuitt overlooking Shoestring Bay. The site is developed with a single family dwelling and all associated appurtenances, which was constructed in about 1947. The wetland resources at the site are land under ocean, land containing shellfish, salt marsh, coastal bank, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. Hold on, I got to hold up. I was reading from the wrong narrative. I have too many projects. I was going to say this is a little bit bigger site. So this site consists of about 4.5 acres of land in Austerville abutting Isham Pond off of North Bay. The site is developed with a single family dwelling circa 1956. pool and also all associated appurtenances. The wetland resources at the site are land under ocean, salt marsh, state and town defined coastal bank, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. The project as proposed is to remove the existing pool, which I will kind of go through this. So this is the existing pool to be removed, and clearing for gardens. The existing pool is located on the landward boundary of the land subject to coastal storm flowage. An area seaward of the pool will be cleared for additional gardens. So that is kind of this whole area. And a 50-foot undisturbed buffer will be maintained between the proposed clearing and the wetland resources. The work limit of work silt fence will be established to protect the buffer during clearing. So we've kind of shown the work limit as a the fence symbol here. So we'll be putting in a silt fence work limit. So all we're doing here is putting in gardens. A lot of gardens, but we're putting in gardens.
Thank you, Chuck. Question from the commissioner. Bill?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a question. I have an observation. I visited the site. Just looking at the plans, it looked like there was a rather large area that was going to be designated new gardens. And a lot of trees are being taken down. And so I visited the site and I was concerned. I thought that it seemed like a rather significant impact on a small, area of woodland. Our building in this town is eliminating a lot of woodland habitat and a lot of I was just really concerned about the amount of natural woods that are being taken out for gardens. And in exchange, we have this swimming pool that is, largely not even in the 100-foot zone. And I'm really concerned about the impact on wildlife. I'm concerned about, the fragmenting of habitat that goes with a project like this. I have a hard time with this project. I really do. I mean, it's, you're just creating a garden in exchange for a lost natural woodland where there's a lot of shrubs and trees. It doesn't make sense to me. I know, it will look beautiful from landscape magazine perspective, but I just think it's an impact on our wildlife that we don't want to do.
Thank you, Bill. Pete?
Let me just unmute. Okay. So it's Chuck doing this, right?
Yes.
So we have a conservation jurisdiction that goes to the far side of the swimming pool, and that's because of its FEMA status?
So in this right here is the limit of conservation jurisdiction. So that it's the 100 feet to the top of the state coastal bank.
Okay, so
which is defined slightly differently than the town defined coastal bank. So that's really why.
So it's different than the 100-foot buffer line that you have.
Yes.
Okay, so within our jurisdiction, there's a removal of 31. I did not have the opportunity to visit the sites. I actually prioritize other things this weekend. But 31 trees. Bill, you can tell me, are they reasonably mature trees? Or Chuck, you can tell me, are they reasonably mature trees or are they 3-inch, diameter scrub oak?
I think that most of them are mature trees.
So we're losing 31 mature trees within our jurisdiction. Now, yes, it is outside of our 0 to 50. But certainly land within our jurisdiction has value for both habitat, as Bill has mentioned, And as for the absorption of nutrients into the biomass of these trees, being mature trees, they're going to soak up a lot of nutrients from that groundwater and or any kind of surface runoff. So like Bill, I'm having, I mean, yeah, gardens are fine, but 31 trees, I mean, essentially it looks almost like a clear cut all the way down to the 50-foot buffer, which is sort of our sacrosanct, you don't do anything there. We're losing all these trees in our jurisdiction, and it just seems counter to what we as a Conservation Commission ought to be concerned about.
Thanks, Pete. Any other question from the commissioner? Bill?
Oh, I do too.
Darcy.
Thank you, Tom. So I was just noticing there's a lot of information as far as, you know, on the landscaping plan than the engineering plan. I'm trying to, first question I have is you do show you want to put a stone wall in, so that is located on both plans. This landscaping plan that you submitted, the writing is so small I can hardly read it. But there is something that's light brown, and I thought that was the proposed retaining wall. But on your engineering plan that's stamped, it looks like it's a curved stone wall. And did you give any? Are you doing any mitigation for the wall? So that's my first question.
Chuck, do you want to show your planting plan?
Oh, I'm sorry. I do see where it says existing stone wall to be removed. So on your engineering plan, there is a current stone wall, kind of a U shape.
Yeah, so if you see here, this is the existing stone wall. I don't think that we picked up on it, but you're right. They have proposed a retaining wall going here. I can tell you that we have not asked for any mitigation because we have a complete native 50-foot buffer, undisturbed native 50-foot buffer.
Oh, okay, all right. And anyways, it looks like you'd be swapping out a stone wall for a stone wall. Okay. Yeah. My second question is, it looks like you, on the landscaping plan, you have some grading that goes very close to the 50-foot edge of the 50-foot buffer, but you don't have the grading changes on your engineering plan. So I would think you would want to have everything you have on this landscape plan, especially the grading changes shown on your engineering plan. And then my third question is, could you give more information about the bioswale? Is this going to be one of those ones filled with the proper material to remove nutrients, and how is that maintained as a protocol? I don't think the file had anything on that bioswale.
That was something put in by the landscape designer that I think that their intent is to keep any possible runoff from going into the 50-foot buffer. I don't have any specific details, but we're happy to provide that.
Yeah, I would like some information on that. It seems like the filing's lacking, like the written information about the bioswale and any maintenance and what is in this bioswale. I wasn't sure if it was one of these ones that that Z is like proposed in some of the areas in the cranberry bogs filled with the same media.
Yeah, that's not the type of usually a bioswale, from my experience, a standard bioswale is just a low point. So that way you kind of create a an area that has native vegetation and it pulls out any nutrients and gets absorbed into the ground slowly, as opposed to getting put into engineered drainage structures.
Okay.
They're kind of
So it's a
usually a little more.
vegetated bioswale. Okay. Yeah, I
that's
would
my
think
answer.
we would want to have more information on what that actually is going to have, being so close to the 50-foot buffer. And are these gardens raised beds?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so there's no wooden structures for the raised beds?
No, they're just gardens on the ground.
Okay. Well, those are my thoughts. I just thought there was some missing information as far as the bioswale.
Chuck, I think the engineering plan is showing the grading change and then showing up your bioswale in the engineering plan as well, because it's kind of, your engineering plan is not matching up of what your proposed plan is under the landscaping plan.
We didn't really want to overcomplicate our engineering plan. We just wanted to kind of keep it a little more vague and let the landscape architecture plan have all the kind of nitty-gritty details. But if you guys would like to have both plans show the same thing, we can do that. It just gets confusing with all the different types of line work, so we'd have to think about having several sheets. We just,
but in the past,
whatever you guys want to do, we'll do it.
But I think in the past, we are using the engineering plan as your primary plan or COC to comparing. The landscaping plan is a supplemental information for that plan. Am I right, Darcy?
Yeah. And I did think of one more quick question. This is organic gardening, so there's no fertilizers or anything going in?
I can't, I'm not a gardener and can't speak to that.
Bill?
But
Bill?
Yeah, in addition to all of those trees that Peter was talking about, I mean, for those that have been to that site, I mean, it is woodland. It has briars, it has bushes, it has dense oak leaves in the ground. In terms of a filter, you know, it's really it's an intact part of, it's a woodland, and it's adjacent, it's contiguous with the neighboring property, which is woodland. And that's a fairly unusual kind of habitat, you know, bordering the estuary, the bay. I mean, it's an unusual habitat, and I just find it really unfortunate that someone wants to just completely eliminate all of that natural, unusual forest. It's more than just the trees. I mean, it's woodland habitat. It has great buffering capability, great wildlife habitat value. I think it's a shame. Anyway.
I can't tell you I totally disagree with you, but I just do. We got asked to get this vegetable gardens approved, and to my knowledge, we've gone through the regulations, and we think that we meet the requirements set forth by this commission.
Thanks, Chuck. John.
Yeah, Chuck, at first when I read this thing, I said, oh boy, we're getting rid of a swimming pool and we're putting in gardens. That's a pretty wonderful trade-off. And you're right, I think, under our existing regulations, relative to there is currently no requirement where you have a fully undisturbed 50 to do additional mitigation in the 50 to 100. However, as I looked at this closely, listened to both Peter and Bill, I'm wondering if in fact the damage to the 50 to 100 by this plan is greater than the benefits of what you're proposing. If you're going to be putting in gardens, which you don't know are organic, and we're going to be adding fertilizer to those, we all know what happens there. At the same time, you're removing 31, you said it, mature trees, which has a negative impact clearly on the performance of the 50 to 100. So even under existing regulations, I'm now thinking aloud that says maybe this proposal is more of a negative to the 50 to 100 than it is a positive to the 50 to 100. You're right, it doesn't require mitigation under the current regulations, but the commission certainly has the authority to say no to this plan if in fact the scientific determination is that the negative impact is greater than the positive impact.
Thanks, John. Luis?
Where does it say that, John?
Where does what say it?
That we have the authority to make that judgment if the applicant is meeting the regulations.
Well, no, the applicant's meeting the regulations relative to the requirement not to mitigate. That's where the regulations are specific, current regulations. And yes, they meet those, Luis, but I think the commission has clear authority to say that the proposal is a negative to the anything within our jurisdiction, which is the 50 to 100 we're talking about here. If the scientific determination is that what is being proposed, the clearing of those trees, et cetera, is versus the removal of a swimming pool and the planting of gardens, which Chuck is saying may or may not contain fertilizer that's going to be added to it, et cetera. You know, we've got to balance the good against the bad. And if the good is going to, if the bad is going to outweigh the good, we clearly have the legal authority and the obligation to say no to this project or to condition it such that maybe all those trees will not be turned down, or maybe no fertilizer will be allowed in gardening, et cetera.
Thank you.
Larry?
Thank you. I'm not comfortable with the way this conversation's going to this extent. I don't see anything in the regulation that defines how it's proven or shown that there's adverse or negative impact. And the other question I would have is if the applicant has proposed to do something, does the burden of proof shift to us to show that there's an adverse impact? I'm hung up on that a little bit, quite a bit actually. I understand and do not find fault with the discussion concerning tree removal and gardening and the whether or not there's going to be a fertilizer, and if so, to what extent, and if so, how close is that to the 0 to 50? I think those are relevant issues. The question is, how do you define an adverse impact? We've been struggling in our 704 discussions about the use of an application and interpretation of impact. I don't think that just deciding or claiming that we have the right to do that is something within our authority. And I think it would be very ripe for an arbitrary and capricious argument being brought. So I think that we're going out on a limb and we're cutting the tree from the wrong side of the limb. I can tell you that. That's the way I look at it.
Excuse me, Tom, can I just answer that question? It might save some time. We do have on chapter 237:11 burden of proof. The applicant shall have the burden of providing by a predominance of credible evidence that the work proposed in the application will not have an unacceptable, significant, and cumulative effect upon the wetland values protected by this chapter. Failure to provide adequate evidence to the commission supporting this burden shall be sufficient cause for the commission to deny a permit or grant a permit with conditions.
Oh, good for you.
That clearly answers, Larry, your concerns.
Yeah, well, no, I think Darcy's great. That's fine for pointing that out. I think that, however, we have to be, and we've given Chuck some information for him to consider. I don't know what role John or O'Day played in all of this. I suspect he was very active in putting it together and thinking that some of these issues might not be raised. But I don't think that John Abadili's argument should be rejected, but I don't think it should be just automatically accepted either, because I think that we're venturing off in a different direction. Looking at this property, It took, I don't know about the rest of you, it took me a while to figure out where the pool was. When I finally found it, there it was hidden over there, and I thought, who'd want to go swimming there anyway? But aside from that, they're proposing to really take this whole side of the property and clean it up or clear it out. And maybe that's what we really should be talking about. Maybe they're asking for too much that, in our opinion, would be raising an adverse impact. And then we may be in a position to try to be more specific as to how it would reserve it. And maybe that would enable the issue to be better defined. So that's where I'm trying to head. I think the rest of the property, to all this here is, there's no issues over here. It's all right over here. So I think that Bill has raised good issues. I think Avadili has. I think Chuck is raising how he interprets it. And so where it comes remains to be seen, but that's sort of where I am on it.
Thank you for Darcy to breaking it up, that chapter 237 clause in there to provide that, the benefit of doing this. If you're looking at the whole site plan on this planting plant, in terms of the proposed garden, the area that Chuck is proposing between 50 and 100 is only a small area of the proposed garden. So I'm wondering, Chuck, can you go back and discuss with your clients on whether you can minimize any clearing in between the 50 and 100 to accomplish what you want? Because if you're looking at the proposed garden, that's pretty big compared to 50 and 100 area. So that's I just want to point that out. Pete,
Chuck, do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I can understand everyone's concerns, but we're only talking about this area really that's in the 50 to 100. So, we haven't proposed any work over here. And additionally, there's a lot of area that is very, very densely vegetated that is not only in the 0 to 50 foot buffer, but in the actual bank. And then we have an entire salt marsh that you're obviously trying to protect, that we're not trying to touch. So I think that this one area it's not as big of an ask as I think you think it is. That's my only point. I mean, we're only showing this area right here, which is about.
I understand where you come from, but if you look at
170 feet long, when our frontage along the bay is over 400.
I understand, but if you not looking at the engineering plan, look at the landscaping plan, the area that you propose on the garden wise is much bigger on the landscaping plan versus the engineering plan.
So just this area right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Pete?
Okay, so I don't think my fellow commissioners need to be a PhD in science to realize that a mature tree sucks up nutrients. That's good for our aquatic resources. A very rich leaf ground litter is very good for absorbing everything. Now, if we replace these 31 trees and the vibrant leaf litter that's underneath that with gardens, which may or may not be organic, I don't know yet. If they're not organic, you're adding nutrients. And your plants are just seasonal. So you will very quickly and easily there see that there will be I suggest, a fairly significant nutrient input coming from this land surface. If it's not organic, we're also likely talking about pesticide and herbicide use. These pesticides in almost every garden unless you are organic. Again, a fairly easy to comprehend negative. So Commissioner Abadili pointed out, on total, in this balance, removal of these trees, removal of this forest with the replacement of gardens. We don't know how well they're going to be, we don't know the purpose of these gardens yet. To me, with minimal science as a teacher, is a pretty clear negative for the resources that we're asked, that we're expected to protect. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry?
My other concern, Tom, deals with a comment you made that the engineering plan is what we look at for the certificate of compliance, whereas we don't necessarily do so with the vegetation. To me, I always thought that they both applied when the certificate of compliance was to be evaluated and determined. The person that did it for the longest period of time was Fred. But in that being said, I seem to remember that vegetation issues would come up in determining whether or not the certificate of compliance was an easy or not. Now, the other property that causes me to look at that way is 24 Flume over on Mystic Lake or whatever it is. So that one is the vegetation is going to be probably more important than the engineering. So to me, conceptually, I think that we need as a commission to consider both of them together or differentiate in a regulation or something else that one applies and the other doesn't. To me, they all apply. So that's the way I would look at it. And that, of course, would reinforce the discussion we're having right now that the plantings and or removal of vegetation is critical. So that's the way I'm looking at it.
Well, the way that I'm looking at is all the proposed hard structure-wise is in terms of all these, what do you call it, the greenhouse and all the other retaining wall, all that new structures need to be showing up on the engineering plan. Yes, there is some difference in terms of the planting here and there. There may be some changes. That's why I said the landscaping plan is a supplemental to the engineering plan. The engineering plan need to show up all the grading change, the new hardscape that they are proposing. That's the difference, to my mind.
Could I add something too? Excuse me, Tom?
Darcy?
Yeah, and just for clarification, we definitely look at both plans during the certificate, but what we're looking for is we always require any changes of grades on the engineering plan. And what would be beneficial if the bioswales are located, because that could also act as a demarcation to make sure that there isn't anything creeping forward into the 50-foot. So if you have the garden area, we could use the edge of those bioswales as the demarcation. That would be important to be on the engineering plan.
John?
I would like to suggest to the applicant that they take a continuation and look at the issues that were raised tonight. Tom, I absolutely agree with you and Darcy on the engineering plan. And obviously the planning plan is clearly supplemental to it and should be looked at. But relative to the critical question that we looked at or that we've discussed, which is this, the trade-off between losing 31 trees and putting in this garden. We don't know what kind of garden, what it's going to be. Points that Peter made, I think, need to be looked at by the applicant. So, Chuck, I would suggest you might want to consider those questions and take a continuation. But obviously, that's your call.
I'm happy to pursue a continuance, and I think it's going to go in that direction. Where did you get 31 trees again?
Bill?
Pete mentioned the 31.
Yeah. So
I don't know how many there are, but this reference to trees, I'm looking at this as like woodland. It's like wildland if you've been there, and it's contiguous with the neighbor's land. And that it's got briars, it's got bushes, it's a great buffer, it's great habitat. And I hate to think, we'll leave the trees up but we'll put the garden all in between it, because I think you want to preserve that kind of habitat.
So Chuck,
I don't know where the third one came from.
Chuck, let me just clarify where the 31 trees were. It's within the jurisdiction that you have noted, which goes beyond our 100-foot buffer. So you have a number of trees to the southeast of the existing swimming pool. That's outside of the 100, but it's within the line, I think, that you have written as our jurisdiction. So within our jurisdiction, we had, to my counting, about 31 trees. Again, that is not necessarily just within the 100-foot. You've got that tight clump within the 100 feet. That definitely is not 31 trees. But within our jurisdiction, I thought I counted 31.
I think that within the 50 to 100, we have 14.
Right, right, I agree.
And
but within our jurisdiction, sort of as Abadili has mentioned, you know, in balance, this is the area that we have jurisdiction over. And in that jurisdiction, which you've identified in this map, there's 31 trees, plus or minus a couple.
If you look at all the X's out of there, just count those trees with the X's in them.
Exactly.
I'm counting 18.
Yeah,
You got to go to the north of, just go to the north. So swing down on the map a little bit.
Yeah.
If you go to the landscaping plan, I think it's marked with a green line.
Why don't we put that on the list of items?
Yeah.
Things to bring back to us.
Good suggestion, Louise.
Sounds good.
George?
Yeah, that was my only question. I was just questioning where that number came from, and if Chuck can provide that, that would be great.
Yeah.
The other question is what type of fertilizer are you using? Is it organic fertilizer or
I got a list of stuff here.
Okay.
Well, and does that 50 to 100 really need to be gardens?
Right.
So Chuck, what kind of continuance that you're looking for? 17?
That should work.
Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
This is going to be the third continuance. Oh, no. This
No.
is the second continuance for the 17th.
First.
No, don't we have another one?
No, that's going to be the February 14th.
No, we have.
Oh, we had the first one was the trustees.
Right.
17. So this will be the second.
Second one.
Second. Yeah. No, we don't have that much agenda, I think, on that one. Could I have a motion to continuance this applications to January the 17th?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Moran.
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next NOI is John and Pamela Layton to construct and maintain stair, a timber block walk, pier, ramp, and float at 592 Pompanetset Road, Kentuit, as shown on the Assessors Map 007, parcel 003. Chuck?
All right. Last but not least, let's go back to this one. Chuck Rowland, Sullivan Engineering Consulting. I'm representing the Laytons at 572 Pompanetset Road in Kentuit. The project site consists of about 8.5 tenths acres of land in Kentuit overlooking Shoestring Bay. The site is developed with a single-family dwelling and all associated appurtenances, which was constructed in about 1947. The wetland resources at the site are land under ocean, land containing shellfish, salt marsh, coastal bank, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. The area is rated a 3 out of 10, designated the area as not significant to shellfish habitat. The project as proposed is construct and maintain stairs, a timber boardwalk, pier, ramp, and float. The proposed pier is for non-motorized vessels only. The proposed pier will be attached directly to the proposed stairs down the bank. And lateral access stairs will be provided, as well as being, the pier will be 5 feet above the salt marsh. In an effort to build the stairs in the existing path location, the applicant is asking for a waiver to Chapter 237 so that the proposed pier can be located where the existing path is and not in the center of the applicant's lot. So if you've been to the site, there's it's a fairly steep bank, and there are existing timber stairs here that are dug in. You can see them. I think I also have. They're dug into the side of the hill right here, and so we're just building the stairs right over them in the same location. And then we have a proposed boardwalk. And then I think my computer just locked up. Nope. With a fairly small 24-foot proposed pier, with the typical ramp and float. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
So before I go there, I think the waiver that you are requesting is under Chapter 703-4L, which is the centerline clause in there. We have received a comment letter from the Natural Resource, and basically Elizabeth is mentioning because of the low water depths, it would suggest that the float have flow stops. And I know in your drawing, it's sort of showing the flow stops. So that kind of answers that question. Under the DMF, they have a comment letter with 5 points. Let me read through the 5 points. The first one is a new pier has a potential to negatively impact the nearby shellfish resource and fishery in a variety of ways. While some of these impacts can be avoided or reduced with best management practices, others are unavoidable and will result in permanent impacts to shellfish habitat and associated fishery access. Support piles would directly displace shellfish habitat, and piles may cause further indirect impacts that negatively affected the bordering shellfish habitat. Leachate from any pressure-treated wood used for supporting piles or decking may also negatively impact nearby shellfish. Associated boating activity could result in pop dredging if the float is installed in insufficient water depths relative to the size of the vessel using the structure. To support pile floats, and adjacent footprint will likely not be accessible to commercial or recreational shellfishing. Second, the DMF conducted 2 field studies to assess the relationship between the shading, marsh growth, and the dock design. These studies collectively indicating the height to width ratios of 1.5 to 1 between the lowest horizontal stringer and the salt marsh substrate, reduced shading and marsh loss relative to the typical required 1-to-1 heights to width ratios. It is not clear if the current plan meets the recommendations. DMF recommended establish a minimum of 1.5 to 1 height to width ratio as across the full extent of the marsh. The third, the plans propose a boardwalk that transfers salt marsh on a diagonal angle. A strict shortened boardwalk that transfers the salt marsh perpendicular to the coastal bank would reduce the area of shading impacts to the underlying salt marsh. Any activities requiring a barge shall be restricted to 2 hours before and after high tide to prevent barge grounding in mapped shellfish habitat. Grounded floats can disturb bottom sediments, resulting in turbidity and direct impacts to benthic habitats. To minimize the impact, DMF recommends the bottom of the proposed float at least 2.5 feet above the substrate be mapped to shellfish habitat and at least 1.5 foot in all marine estuary habitats at mean low tide. DMF also recommending adjusting the flow stop to a height that would allow the float to maintain a 1.5 foot clearance above the substrate, mean low water. Questions, Pete?
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm not muted. So Chuck, we have here a non-motorized pier in, of course, it's non-motorized because it's really shallow water. You've got the pier stops, the float stops being recommended at 1.5 feet above the sediment, so that we don't have much pumping with any kind of wave action. But my big question, Chuck, is how come this is permanent piling versus temporary pilings for this structure?
So, well, there's a few things. The temporary piers, as much as I know that you guys like to see them, but this isn't really going to be a fun spot to have someone pulling temporary piles out every year and putting them back, in my opinion. Additionally, I think you're going to cause a lot of disturbance putting them in the salt marsh. Besides that, I think that you get less and less people every year that want to do a lot of this work. Besides that, I don't know what to tell you. We've been getting a lot of them approved as well. And
okay, certainly it's the temporary within the marine environment. I'm not that familiar with temporary over salt marsh. I think sometimes we take off the platforms so that more sunshine gets down. But what I have put into the record, and it's something that I want my fellow commissioners to just be thinking about, we have fairly consistently for non-motorized craft had temporary docks given the benefit that they provide to our environment, such as the limitation of exotic species. I put into the file, a plethora of scientific articles, both from primary literature and from our state, in terms of the concern for exotic animals, epizootic animals preferring vertical substrates, which in fact is what permanent piles are. So again, for I'd say almost decades at this point, if we have non-motorized piers, unless there's a big ice problem, and actually normally we always take them out then, unless there's some other really good reason, and Chuck, if you can get a professional to come in here as opposed to your opinion, that might help sway me in terms of your request for it being permanent as opposed to temporary. This commissioner is going to stay consistent with, if it's a non-motorized dock, it should be temporary pilings. Thank you.
Thanks, Speak. George?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, Pete, this is a really tough area. There's really literally no bottom here. And I think we've been pretty consistent in Shoestring Bay. I believe we've approved 3, at least in my mind, that have all been permanent piling piers, because 4x4s, for 2 reasons. One is they don't stand up well because there is no decent bottom for them to hold in there. And I agree with Chuck. There's very few people, contractors, that want to go into this area and take these, put these in and take them out, because there's no bottom there. There's no way to hold these 4x4s in place. So really the only way to build a pier in this environment is with permanent piles. So, and I believe I'm correct. I know of 3 right off the top of my head on this same shoreline that we've approved for with permanent piles.
Okay, so George, just give me a little bit of background of your experience, sure, and tell me more about this bottomless environment.
Okay, so this is muck. There's just muck. The longest 4x4 post you can get is 16 feet long. So that means you're only putting about 6 to 8 feet maximum in the ground, and they just don't hold. They literally don't hold.
Okay, so in this,
I've been there, I've done it. It's horrible.
so in this environment,
yep.
While we can and we do prefer, for the reasons that I've stated in others, where we do prefer, when it's possible, temporary pilings in this environment here that we're talking about right now. It is not a viable option. Is that your professional opinion, George?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, Chuck. I got it from an expert there. Thanks.
The other things too, I remember, you know, Dennis keep mentioning about the problem with the temporary seasonal pier in the Shoestring Bay environment in the winter. So there's always a problem in there. And I mean, just like George said, I think we have approved permanent pier in this case in the Shoestring Bay area, only along this stretch of the bay that we approve the permanent pier. Otherwise, in other locations, we only approve a seasonal pier for a non-motorized area.
Okay,
Louise?
Yeah, I just was gonna just say that I know of at least 2, possibly 3 in that general area in Shoestring where we have said, okay, go with a permanent pier because of the condition of the bottom. So I'm supporting that.
Bill?
Yeah, I'd just like to say in my short tenure, I seem to remember us approving one, and it was that same problem of you really can't put in a temporary, just too mucky. So I'm supportive.
Larry?
George, this is for you. Is there something other than a 4x4 post? Would a helical work there? Is there any other type of mechanism that could be not necessarily permanent, but also something that's put in there that will hold much better and not be pulled away by current or weather?
I don't think there's anything else. A helic would not hold very well there, again, for the same reason. A pile, the way a pile works is it works by friction. So it's a function of its diameter, its depth, and the material it's going into. So you need the depth and you need the diameter in order for it to hold sufficiently in an area like this.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, George.
Surface area.
Yep.
All right. Any other question from the commissioner?
Excuse me, Tom?
Darcy.
Yes, thank you, Tom. This might, I would just recommend this might be a good one to have a finding on.
Okay. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none.
None. Let me try a finding. I don't know whether that will be sufficient. If you guys want to correct it, just let me know. I would like to have a finding because of the permanent piling for this location in Shoestring Bay, that the environment, the conditions does not support the seasonal pier. That's why we would approve the permanent pier piling on this.
I think that's fine.
You don't think more needs to be said, John? I thought that it should be based upon the subsurface muck is not a good word, but the subsurface conditions.
I thought that's what he was getting to, Lair, but maybe not.
Well, I just thought it should be a little bit more specific, including the reduced availability of contractors to come in and do the work.
I would recommend.
I'm not sure I'd add that, in my opinion, because I think it's, that's not as much of a concern as the environmental issues caused by the bottom of this, and that's what makes this unique, allowing for a permanent pier as opposed to seasonal.
Yeah, I would recommend George, with his expertise, have some wording into this finding, please.
Good idea.
I would say that due to the subsurface conditions in the Shoestring Bay area, whereas we would normally request a seasonal pier is not appropriate, and permanent piling is necessary.
Thank you.
And we should also just mention, since we have a finding, that we're allowing a waiver of L, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We are allowing the waiver of Chapter 703-4L.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Motion to approve the finding as amended by George.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Yeah, aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Could I have a motion to approve this project as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Sampu.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
The last NOI of the evening is Stephen and Beth McFarland. Constructions of permanent piles, supported piers for non-motorized vessel at 150 Carriage Road, as shown on the Assessors Map 071, parcel 015003. Arlene?
Good evening again. Arlene Wilson, AM Wilson Associates, here for the McFarlands. Excuse me. This site is on the south side, on the east side of Oyster Harbors, below the causeway. It's a little better than 2 acres. Based on town records, it was first developed around 1935. It has a single-family home with an attached garage, rather significant landscaping, and a bulkhead that was approved by the commission under SE 32418. Resource areas at the site are land underwater, land containing shellfish, an expanding salt marsh, small patches of intertidal sandy beach, a short discontiguous sections of coastal bank. It's not restricted under the Coastal Wetlands Restriction Program, and no portion of the project area is mapped by Mass Natural Heritage as important habitat. There are no soft shell clams in the intertidal zone. That was confirmed not only by our private shellfish study, but by the town shellfish study as well. The hard shell habitat begins where the water depths are at about minus 20 inches. And the area is mapped by the town as a 6. There's also no eelgrass. What Darcy is showing are some historic aerials that we pulled off the town website to show you that the salt marsh here is actually expanding, which is kind of an interesting situation. You don't see that happening very often. But in the 2001 aerial, which was the first one she had up, there's practically no salt marsh. We're all going to get dizzy. So you can see there was quite a beach there at that point in time.
You just let me know when you want me to change this, like to scroll down, because I'm guessing. Tell me when to scroll down.
If you go down to the next one now, Darcy.
Okay.
You'll be, which is from April of 2009, you can see that salt marsh is starting to expand across the site, and the bare sand is quite a lot narrower. And if you go to the 2015 aerial, which is the next one, you can see that what we have now is quite a significant and healthy salt marsh with a very narrow unvegetated section on the beach. So the project, the goal of this, because the applicants, the McFarlands, wanted to have relatively easy and safe and protective access for their small boat work. And if we go to the project plan, I think sheet 2, Darcy will do it. Oh, and that's just another photograph of the current salt marsh situation. So, keep going.
That's
so
all I have on the, that's all I have that you sent me in that batch. I'm gonna have to.
Oh, I thought you were gonna have the project plan available.
Okay.
Too.
Yeah, let me, I will pull that up. I have to switch to a different thing, so be
Thank
patient.
you. So what we wanted to do was to try and protect that salt marsh by reducing as much as possible the potential for foot traffic and boat traffic coming through that marsh. There is, as I mentioned, an existing bulkhead that was permitted by the commission. And what we propose is to run the pier from the northerly corner of that bulkhead out over the marsh at as high an elevation as seemed practical and out into the water. Because this area is mapped as a 6 and the maximum length for this pier is 81.5 feet based on the width of the lot out from low water, we only get to a little better than 2.6 feet of water at mean low. So with a 30-inch draft restriction for the 6 mapping, that gives us a dinghy dock. Rather than have a float at the end and have to deal with the problem, thanks Darcy, and have to deal with the problem of float stops, which have a tendency to pull the pier out of line, I think we have gone with a platform at the end of the pier. It has a kayak rack on the north side and stairs to get down into the water on the south side. This is essentially the same design that the commission approved in August for the Landry Pier, and a couple of years ago approved on East Bay Road for the Raimondi Pier. This is also proposed as a permanent installation. The reason for that is several-fold. You've heard me before. I think the problem with seasonal piers in terms of habitat protection is that you wind up with liquefied sediments in the area where the posts are set because of the jetting that goes on. And that jetting is twice a year. You put them in, you take them out. Because the sediments in that hole become very soft when the posts are reset, the contractors tend to push them around a little bit to grab the edges where the sediments are firmer in order to get the structural stability that you were talking about in the previous project. That means that those areas of impact, although the post is only 4 by 4 inches, after a few years, the impact area gets to be almost a foot square. So you wind up with the same adverse impact that you do from a pile supported pier where there's a 12-inch diameter pile. The only difference is the permanent pier is a set it and forget it issue. You put it in once and that's the end of it. The pier is structurally stable enough that if someone were to shellfish around it, they could go right up to and underneath it without impacting the structural integrity of the pier, which is not the case with a seasonal dock. I remember that previous shellfish wardens in town recommended that shellfishermen stay 15 to 20 feet away from seasonal piers in order not to impact the stability of the pier. So all of that being said, the pile displacement here is proposed at about 4.7 square feet in the grass and marsh section, about 1.6 feet in the unvegetated intertidal zone, and about 9.4 feet below mean low water. Based on our shellfish study, the ERC shellfish study, that's a loss of about 2 cohogs over the entire pier. And based on Liz Lewis, the town shellfish biologist, study less than 10 animals. We would be happy to provide mitigation in the form of funds for shellfish propagation if the Conservation Commission decided that that was appropriate. In terms of fouling organisms on the piles, Brad Holmes, the shellfish biologist who did our study, looked at the pilings on the adjacent piers. Both the piers bracketing this site are pile supported. He found some barnacles, but basically no soft-shelled organisms. We've also provided a copy of the Tyrell Byers study from Wells, Maine, that looked at the problem of exotic fouling organisms in the Northeast. In fact, this study, which is from Wells, Maine, is really the only one of its kind we've been able to find in New England. They say that the exotic fouling organisms become less of a problem on natural materials like wood, stone, and shell, and that most exotics in this area die off when the water gets cold or are scraped off by the ice in the winter. That they are a bigger problem on horizontal surfaces like floats. But since floats get removed for winter storage, the animals die off there as well. The studies that Commissioner Sampu has provided for the file, the Boleri and Chapman study is from the coast of Belgium. The Glaspie et al. Study is from Sydney, Australia. And the Boleri and Airoldi Codium study is from the northeast coast of Italy along the Adriatic. I would suggest that these areas are not comparable to the Oyster Harbor's shore here in Massachusetts. There's been a suggestion or a discussion that ice lift is problematic for seasonal docks. It certainly can be. The solution that is common, but that is a problem for shellfish areas, are to install bubblers. We would not suggest that there be bubblers at this site, but rather that we use PVC collars in the winter around the piles. They have proved to be reasonably effective at area marinas like Oyster Harbor's Marine. In terms of compliance with 703-4, which is the town's pier regulations, we meet all of the requirements, we believe, except for section L. That's the one that requires centering. Again, we believe that the appropriate location here is to run this thing off the north end of the bulkhead with a little path from the lawn that allows in winter the boats to be hauled up around to the garage fairly easily. And the fact that it's not quite centered really has very little impact on the distance from the abutting piers. The site is 60 feet from the north property line, but it still provides about 142 feet of separation to the northerly pier and about 148 feet to the southerly pier. So in terms of the piers themselves, this is centered on the other two piers reasonably closely. To the extent that the commission believes that that would require a waiver, we have asked for one. We would also note, if you remember the aerials that were pulled up earlier, both of the neighbors have multiple motorboats on their piers, yet the area is still a significant shellfish resource. So the boating activities really don't seem to have impacted the shellfish habitat significantly in this area. And we are aware that because of current regulations, the McParlands cannot have a motorboat presently. And so they will have none of the problems of potential prop scour and other things that the motorboats can occasionally cause. The Shellfish Committee meeting was a little bit startling for me. Here, where the salt marsh is actively growing and providing nutrient and habitat benefits for both shellfish and finfish, as well as wave attenuation for erosion control for the upland owners. The Shellfish Committee seemed to prefer the idea that the owners would drag their kayaks and canoes through the marsh, walk through the marsh continually to get to the water, and cause resultant damage to that marsh, instead of having a pier that would get them into the water without that damage. The Shellfish Officer's report has suggested a boardwalk as a potential alternative. And I think the commission knows that in general, I prefer a lower structure. So there are a lot of situations where my office has in fact proposed a boardwalk a foot or two above the substrate on a beach where there's light vegetation. But because of the unusual nature of the expanding marsh here, we believe that the higher structure is actually a significant benefit because it will provide that protection for the salt marsh. Boardwalks at this location would encourage pedestrian traffic through the marsh to get to that boardwalk, as well as not really preventing the boat dragging situation. The other alternative that would be real here would be a length waiver where the project could get out to deeper water. But my experience is that this commission really doesn't prefer that to happen. Ms. Lewis has also cited a concern for the platform, that the stairs might act as groin. Clearly, if there were solid risers, that might be the case, but there are no solid risers here. And the water can pass horizontally and vertically through those stairs. The DMF comments didn't come into my office until about 4 o'clock this afternoon. I don't know if the commission received them earlier than that. They cite a concern for winter flounder in this area. The winter flounder spawning time is January to May. I believe that's an additional argument for not having a seasonal pier at this location, because those piers generally go in April, which means there would be turbidity issues during spawning habitat, spawning period. So the piles which would go in once and could be put in outside a time of year restriction would be more protective for the flounder habitat as well. The DMF doesn't pay much attention to the text in the NOIs as a rule, and they haven't here. They talk about damage caused by motorboats. We're not having a motorboat. They also suggested they were concerned that the stairs might catch debris. And in order to alleviate that, we can certainly design the stairs to be lifted up onto the platform in the wintertime. So they'd be hinged and flipped back up and bolted down in the winter if the commission feels that's a problem. I don't think that has been a problem at the Raimondi Pier, which is the one that's actually constructed with these stairs, has been in the water for a couple of years now and has received a certificate of compliance. That pier also had no concerns issued about the platform and stairs from either the Mass Division of Waterways or the Corps of Engineers. That DMF letter also cites their standard marsh shading impact concern. We've been through that quite a number of times. We're proposing graded rather than slotted surface over the marsh here. The openings in the graded surface are about 1-to-1 because they are that large. The shadow from the sides of the graded material don't obviate the ability of the sunlight to go through those holes, and you get much better sunlight penetration. The Corps looked at that argument very carefully in one of our projects a few years ago and wound up concurring with us and allowing the graded surface. So I think that would be the same. During the time, I will stop at that point and see if the commission has questions that I might be able to answer.
Before I open up, there's a couple of comments that I want to read into the record. One, the Shellfish Committee has sent us a letter asking the commissions to either deny this application or postpone the final determination of this NOI until after January the 2023 Shellfish Committee's meeting, which will allow the committee to have received and review a copy of the town biologist report regarding these applications. Secondly, is from the Waterway and Harbor Master. They have no objections to this NOI because the location and the boat traffic in this area is minimum. The Arlene mentioned about the DMF letter, but I just want to read a couple of things in here. One, while this project site is not a marina, West Bay has experienced high dock proliferations, and so the further additions of pile structures continues to add potential habitat for invasive in addition to native furnace. The other height width ratio is the same as the previous applications. The Liz Lewis has submitted a report. I think it's December 27 or so. She kind of mentioning that there are several parts in the pier design that will have significant impact on the habitat and shell fishery. A permanent pier of this length would take up a large amount of space, with just the piling alone permanently removing this area as shellfish habitat from the fishery. Another concern is in the winter times, permanent dock owner runs ice eater so that the piling are not frozen in ice and then forced out of positions. With such shallow depths of water, the ice eater will create scarring of the bottom similar to the propeller of a boat would be in shallow water. On the average low, there is only 2.7 feet of water according to the charts on a potential minus tide. There are both benefits and detrimentals to seasonal versus permanent pier, and this can be argued at length either way. While it is unfortunate that seasonal piling holes do not fill themselves in when a pier is removed, it does not mean that the better alternative is a permanent pier that permanently removes the shellfish habitat. As I have said before, at least with a seasonal pier, it is gone for half of the year, and that natural processing can take place often during the most critical spring and settling time for shellfish in early spring. While alternatives to piers are the best options, a seasonal pier at least is only there for part of the year. In this case of 150 carriage roads, the habitat is incredibly suitable for shellfish and should be regarded as such. The shallow water does not allow for a motorized vessel, and kayak can easily be carried from the shore, perhaps over a boardwalk at the beginning of the beach. No pier is necessary in such a vulnerable area. The impacts on the significant shellfish habitat from these proposed projects can be avoided. After consideration of these facts, natural resource cannot support the proposed projects. And Arlene also has submitted, I think on Saturday, a comment to Liz Lewis' letter. So I think that is in the record. I think our Commissioner Pete has sent out a couple of emails regarding to some of the documentations that he wants to bring it into the file, and they are in the file. So with that, I'll go to the Commissioner. Pete?
Okay, so Arlene, I got a question for you. Are scientific findings from other parts of the world, so you claimed, and rightly so, that a number of the primary literature papers that you even put some of them in your filing, but then I also made sure were in the filing. Is it your suggestion that scientific findings from other parts of the world are not applicable to our waters?
I think the issue, Pete, is whether the conditions at the study locations are similar to the conditions that we have here. So, for instance, the study from Sydney absolutely is not comparable. The water is much warmer, the climate is much warmer, and the study was done in an industrial harbor where there are large commercial ships emptying ballast.
Okay. Do we have invasive species, exotic species along our shoreline?
There have been some that have been noted.
What is our state said?
The rapid assessment studies, which I think is what you're referring to, one of which I included. And those studies have some problems because they haven't been able to go back and look at the same places over and over again. They have a few places they've looked at.
No.
Sandwich Marina is the closest one that they've repeated.
So this is your opinion, right?
Pardon me?
This is your opinion, right?
This is the information from the study.
Okay,
that-
and
okay.
what's your background in biological oceanography?
I don't have a PhD, clearly.
I do.
I know you do. I've had undergraduate work, and I've done some graduate level work through courses at Bridgewater.
So do you consider yourself an expert in this field?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
The rest of my case, I want to move on. I want to move on.
No, let me finish my answer, please, Pete. I can review this information. I have 40 years of experience in the area looking at piers and docks and coastal projects and their impacts. And I can read these studies. And what the rapid assessment study says is that the problems are most significant on horizontal surfaces like floats, but that most of the exotics that we see here are killed off in the winter because they tend to be warm water species, and the cold water causes them to die off.
Okay.
And as to the floats are removed in the winter. Okay. Everything dies on them. They go back and they repeat the cycle. Okay. I have spoken with Chris Gargiulo from Katuitt Oyster to see whether he has observed problems in the area. He says that there are in the Katuitt area some tunicates.
Called tunicates.
Soft-bodied organisms, otherwise known as sea squirts around here.
Yeah, tunicates.
And they are getting some species that they weren't seeing 10 or 15 years ago. But in general, he said that they are not seeing a lot of different species growing around, and that those things are growing predominantly on the bottoms of his equipment where there are flat surfaces, and the bottoms of materials that are non-native as well.
Okay.
So
can I speak?
So the study findings are pretty consistent with what Chris is finding.
So can I speak now? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
You provided a lot of hearsay, third-party quote evidence here, Arlene. We have Brad, someone or other, not finding fouling on neighboring docks. We have Don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me.
Let's speak finished.
So you have this in your 40 years of consulting. Again, I don't know if you've had any peer-reviewed work done, evaluation of the stature of your findings, that you say that findings from other parts of the world, science, are invasive species a problem. We know this on land, invasive species. That's one of our foundational mitigations that we're doing. We have a lot less knowledge about that in our coastal waters. Our state, however, has identified it as something we should be concerned about. And clearly, if you remove a pile every year, you definitely get the killing. We do have exotics from Europe. Clearly, we've got the green crab. So not all of our exotics are coming from the tropics. You have this statement, stay away from seasonal piers because of soupy sediment. Again, that was hearsay. I'm not certain if you can get sort of professionals that will give us evidence of these claims you're making, I'll gladly listen to them. But what you have done in this introduction is you've given to me, and maybe my other commissioners, a lot of hearsay. And please, Just provide better evidence so that I can put more value into it. I'm good for now.
Thank you, Pete. Larry?
Thank you. There's a lot of issues here that I can't base it on a scientific knowledge, but I did take the time and had the time to read the ECR proposal and Liz's proposal. I found very little difference between them, as a matter of fact. I thought that the facts that were recited were pretty consistent as to the number of quahogs found and the fact that there was no real other shellfish. I also found issues dealing with whether it's a seasonal or permanent is quite different from the one we just considered at Shoestring Bay. We have different criteria here, but the rationale is whether or not a seasonal pier would have an ongoing adverse effect or impact to the salt marsh as well as to the substrate. And the other matter is whether or not a pier was preferred versus a boardwalk, or whether the marsh should be ignored by trampoline going back and forth. Those issues, I think Arlene has addressed very articulately. She's balanced it out. She's presented a balanced approach. The concept of hearsay it's universal. Everything in this thing is hearsay. Anything that somebody else writes that we are not in a position to question the author is hearsay. And all these articles that get presented in these hearings are balancing acts. It's a question of how specific they are versus the facts unique to the particular area, but it's also based upon whether they jive or to what extent they conflict with our own regulations. Our own regulations don't cover a lot of these things that have been discussed in the last 15 or 20 minutes. And I think the contentiousness that has arisen during this discussion so far is somewhat uncharacteristic of how we have handled differing views. Seems to be the culture today is that if you don't agree with me, you're wrong. I think the question really is whether or not there's sufficient evidence presented by the applicant to justify a permanent pier rather than a seasonal pier, justify a pier versus a boardwalk. The Shellfish Committee did have a meeting. Their last meeting was December 14. And when I saw the materials coming from them, I decided to listen to the video. And in the video, there were no facts discussed by the Shellfish Committee. Nothing was presented that was factual. It was just different things that some of the members might have thought about, but none of it related to the facts at all. So my opinion is that this application supports the requisite burden of proof. It gives us ample bases upon which a permanent pier should be installed. All the other factors have been considered respectfully to the environment, and I think that that's where we are.
Well, thank you, Larry, for explaining that, but I kind of have another thought about that, because if Arlene is talking, if the applicant is only talking about a dinghy boat, right, not a motorized boat, you don't need 81 feet long pier, okay? You don't need that. There is no 30-inch rule applying for a dinghy boat. You don't need that long of a pier. You can shorten it and be seasonal, and you're done. But that's only my comment. But George.
Yeah, I would say for 25 years, we've gone back and forth on seasonal versus permanent piers. I happen to be on the permanent side because I've always felt it was better to disturb the bottom once. I put in 4x4 piers, seasonal piers. I put in permanent piers. I do agree with Arlene. I think that the disturbance caused by jetting twice a year over the course of time is a greater disturbance to the bottom than doing it once. So I'm on the permanent pier side. The other thing I do agree with Arlene on is this notion of being able to put a boardwalk out over that marsh, which is amazing. I mean, it's amazing how that's growing. But putting a boardwalk over the top of that and then having enough clearance to make it worthwhile, and then getting to a level where you can launch kayaks on the beaches, I don't think that's feasible. So having said that, I agree with Tom that maybe we could shorten this a little bit, Arlene. I don't know if that's possible for you or not. And also perhaps we could lengthen out the pile vents. I forget what do you have, Arlene, for pile vents? I forget. What's the length of the pile vents?
Yeah. Some of them are about 15 feet on center.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
There are a couple of sections that are shorter than that.
Yeah, if we could do them all 16 foot on center, that's possible from a construction point of view. That would eliminate some of the piles. But all in all, I see this meeting our regulation. I thought it was a very interesting comment by Brad Hall that he did observe both docks on either side, and that there weren't, he didn't find any growth on those docks other than barnacles. So I thought that was significant. But I'll hear what other people have to say, and we'll go from here. Thank you.
Bill?
All right. Invasive species is a problem. And regardless, we can talk about publications from different parts of the world. Are they relevant? And, when you get into the literature, you've got to really, what are they even talking about? And, is it even relevant? I mean, you can just cite a paper from New Zealand, and is that even relevant? And you have to look at those articles. But what Pete was basically saying is invasive species are a problem. They're a problem in Massachusetts. And that having a seasonal dock is a way of eliminating that impact. And so I tend to go with the seasonal because of the invasive species. There's another consideration, and, I'm kind of new to this whole argument. I haven't been doing it for 20 years or whatever you've been. But within our dock, our marine dock reg, in the first section, it says the placement, length, and size of docks and appurtenant floats can interfere with the harvesting of quahogs, soft shell clams, and scallops, and that they can be a significant impact. And so they can't interfere with the harvesting, and recreational fishing is an issue. And I don't know if we're going to be hearing from recreational fishermen or not. We should certainly be waiting to hear what the Shellfish Committee says about all of this. Our regs, the very last part of the introduction, says docks conforming to the following regulations can be presumed to minimize the aforementioned possible negative impacts. And when I read this for, I think maybe the third time that I looked at it, I realized our regs don't deal with the way docks can interfere with the harvesting of quahogs and soft-shell clams and scallops. And so that's just something that, to me, is another effect that we may want to consider. So therefore, by taking, again, the dock out half the year, you are affording better access to recreational or commercial fishermen. This is just an aside. I mean, I don't want to get into some heated thing, but I read with interest Liz Lewis's comments, and then at the last second today, I'm like, oh, Arlene has refuted Liz Lewis's comments. Whether she did it accurately or correctly or whatnot is another matter. But I'm wondering, is Liz Lewis able to then come back and respond to that in that debate? And so I'm like kind of concerned. I want to uphold our recreational shell fishing committee and our town biologist who seems to have a concern and is opting for the seasonal. I like the idea that, Tom says, yeah, how about a shorter pier? You don't need a long pier. And that's pretty sensible to me. And then lastly, something that Arlene threw out that made sense. It's like, well, if you want hinge stairs, maybe, we can flip them up in the winter. I don't know where you're going with the stairs at the end of the dock. But again, yeah, I'd go with the hinge stairs. So anyway, those are my diverse thoughts.
Thanks, Bill. Pete?
Okay, just had to unmute. Yeah, I just want to remind my fellow commissioners that we have two other groups in our town that provide us very valuable information and frankly have better expertise than most of us. Certainly a wide-ranging historical and applicable naturalist experience or overview on our shell fishery resource is our Shellfish Committee. It's composed of a number of different individuals, sometimes with long histories in commercial, sometimes with some biology, sometimes with legal, but together have a lot more experience than I even have. Secondly, we have a town-hired shellfish biologist. That was this individual's major. This is this individual's career. So when we hear from these individuals giving us recommendations, we should really hold their input at the highest level of respect, much more so than hearsay that's not documented. And Larry, I'm going to take issue with your thoughts about hearsay. When you publish a paper in a peer-reviewed journal, that is not hearsay. So don't even ever go there again. You need to know what you're talking about when you're talking about peer-reviewed science.
Thank you, Pete. John?
What a fun conversation we're having, you guys. Couple of thoughts that I had. Pete, let me address your last comments. I think you're absolutely right. When we have town experts and we have, people that have been shellfishing all their life here, et cetera, we should give great weight to their thoughts and input. They are not, absolute. We're not bound by them, but absolutely we should give them great weight and credibility. Equally true where you've got expert consultants with long history in this area, you also got to listen and give credibility to them, and we have to balance all of those with his opposing views, and that is a very difficult thing to do. Arlene, relative to the guidelines that Bill referred to, or the regulations, there's also a specific comment in that of the commission's preference for seasonal docks. So don't say that you meet your regulations, because that's part of those regulations, those exact words. I, on the other hand, kind of look at this thing and say, yeah, we normally should have seasonal docks where it's a kayak situation and non-motorized craft. I listened to the arguments about exotic species, and I find some credibility in that. I agree with Pete that it's not the same definition as the legal definition of hearsay, Larry, that you hear in the code or law. They are just scientific studies that are introduced and can be argued for or against. And I think that's what exactly Pete and Arlene were discussing and disagreeing on the relevance of each of those. Where I tend to come out on this particular one is that I think it is a significantly overbuilt dock for a kayak use. I think the bench should be longer, as George pointed out. I think that the length should be shorter. clearly much shorter. I don't know why you need 12-inch pilings on this versus smaller, maybe 10-inch pilings, but again, George could jump in on that. So as presented, I have trouble agreeing with this and think it needs to be significantly redesigned along those lines. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, John. Arlene, do you want to do a response, or you want to see? Oh, let me see whether there's any other comment from Commissioner.
I guess I'll jump in. Let's see, I'm actually, although the regs state a preference for seasonal docks, I agree with George. I'm a permanent person, but I feel I need to be consistent with what the regs say. So that's where I am on that. I think that for a dinghy dock, it doesn't have to be that long. So I would go for a shorter dock, and with the design that George has suggested. And I'm happy to listen to both sides of the scientific data available having to do with the impact of various kinds of surfaces on the population of exotics. I think it's very interesting, and I'm glad to hear both sides. So that's where I am.
You need to go to the public at some point, Tom.
Yeah. I want to give Arlene the chance first before I go to the public comment.
Just a few things. In response to Pete, the gentleman who's done our shellfish survey has specific training in the area, and we're happy to provide his resume if Pete would like to have it for the file, but he is eminently qualified. The issue of hearsay, just briefly, I know that the standard that Pete is talking about is very different than the legal standard for hearsay. But the fact that Pete hasn't performed any of the studies that he's put in the file any more than I have performed the studies that I put in the file doesn't make our talking about them hearsay. The studies stand for themselves, and with the exception of the rapid assessments that the state has done, they are all the studies that have been put in the file have been peer reviewed to the best of my knowledge. The issue of the length of this pier, we're happy to go back and look at that. We can also look at whether using a smaller diameter pile might make less of a usurpation of bottom, except that the smaller diameter pile means that you can't get quite as long a bent section. So there's some trade-off there. We can look at both of those issues and see which of those things is beneficial and how much water we actually need in order to make sure that the end of this pier doesn't adversely impact the bottom where the shellfish resource is. So on that note, I know that you need to take public comment, but I will be asking for a continuance.
Thank you, Arlene. Channel 18, any public comment on this?
Seeing none, unless Patricia has anything she'd like to add.
Patricia, do you want to say anything?
comment.
Assuming no. Pete.
Yeah, let's see if I am verbal. Perhaps it was overlooked. This is a letter from 2009. Paul Diodati, the director of the Division of Marine Fisheries. It was for a different applicant, a different application for a pier, but I want to read a couple of sentences out of that letter to us here at the Barnstable Conservation Commission. So the Marine Fisheries has the following concerns. Pilings provide structure for colonization of invasive species, as well as increase the potential for trash and wreck accumulation. Piles also increase the probability of intercepting ice during winter storms, causing gouging of the substrate. Extra piles and cross members create more places for ice to hang up and create scour pits. Those are negative effects during the winter months that a permanent pier would potentially have an impact on. The last bullet from here as well, from Paul Diodati. The continued proliferation of piers in Barnstable and other Cape towns could have a cumulative detrimental impact on the Commonwealth's marine resources and could in turn result in a much diminished population of marine species in these embayments. The Commission should carefully consider the cumulative impacts of these structures that they could have on the town's natural resources. So again, it's not in the direct application to this pier in front of us now, but I think it applies as to the seasonal versus permanent nature of a dinghy dock. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
Tom?
Who's
Tom,
this?
can you hear me? It's Patricia Farina.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay. I do have a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Little computer issue back there when you were calling on me.
Okay.
I just want to second what Pete actually just said.
Patricia, can you identify yourself?
All right. Patricia Farina, town member, Shellfish Committee. I do want to second what Pete just said regarding the proliferation of all of our docks on our shores. We know what the results are. We see it constantly, and we know we're putting the nail in there. The other thing I'd like to say is everything I've heard here tonight, I'm certainly in agreement with, but there was nothing said. I could tell Peter talked about shellfish in general. And yes, we're all about the harvesting and enjoying that, both commercial and the recreational, but let's not forget what the shellfish are there for and what they do for our environment and how important they are to that environment and how we have lost so much already. Just how much more can we afford to lose? At least for this generation, what are we leaving behind us? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Tom, may I ask a question of Patricia before she leaves?
I'm here.
Tom, is that all right if I ask her a question?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay, Patricia, is there winter shell fishing in that area, either recreational or commercial? Is that done through the winter time as well as in warm season?
Yes, it is.
And what kind of shellfish do they pull out of those areas?
Well, I gather I would go for quahogs. I don't really I'm not strong enough now to dig for anything that's soft shell, but other people would be able to. And it did speak, and I was looking at Liz's, by the way, I want to note, Liz upgraded this from a 6 to a 10 as far as an area is concerned. And she did mention the razorback clam, I think is the one I'm thinking of. I've never had an appeal to me, but I can think of other people in the town who has an appeal. So yeah, there's shellfishing there for us, all of us.
One more question, if I might. And I do some shell fishermen, some shell fishing, mostly for oysters in the season. But where you have holes or soft spots left by seasonal pilings that are jetted in and removed versus permanent piles, from shellfishing, both commercial and recreational, which of those two are the greatest negative in your opinion and experience?
Oh.
You don't want to answer that, please don't.
That's a tough one to answer because the degradation of the bottom of the ocean is so bad in different areas that you're up to your ankles in muck. And to me, that's far the more serious issue than around the holes that are there. I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question. To me, it's a matter now. I've gotten older, and I'm getting older every day. And it's a question of where am I safe to walk? And I'm a lot safer on a sandy gravel quality bottom than I am in the muck up to my ankles. Because if I go down, you know, it's going to be a terrible shock in the winter. And that's why, of course, we don't go alone and we always take a whistle, but still.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your honesty. And as getting older, I can understand exactly what you're saying. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, Tom.
Problem for all of us.
Us to getting older. Patricia, I have one quick question. You make a reference to the rating of the shellfish has changed. When was that changed?
I thought that's what I read here in what Liz had reported.
We are, Tom, excuse me, we have a formal shellfish rating that we've adopted, but she indicated that as they relook at it, it would probably be upgraded. So what's unfortunately before us is the formal guideline that we had adopted, the formal rating.
That's what I wondered.
That's what I was referring to. Yeah. It's what she had written. Yeah.
Tom, if I might, I actually asked Amy Proto about that, and she said that because I asked her for the backup data to the change in rating, and she said that the recommendations would be going to you, the commission, and it would be up to the commission to decide whether or not to adopt them, and she sidestepped entirely whether I could get the background data for the basis of the change.
As of now, in my opinion, we have the adopted shellfish ratings.
Right.
Correct. So Arlene, when do you want to do the continuance? The only thing I would suggest is like maybe the 31st.
Probably into the beginning of February, Tom, because if we have to redo these plans, it's going to take a little while. And I know that Rob Brayman is up to his eyeballs at the moment. So what's the first meeting in February?
The first meeting, we don't take continuance, right, Darcy, in the afternoon?
Right.
Yes, we are going to start that in January because we're not doing just the 4:30. We're starting a hearing at 3 p.m. So we do take continuances now.
Tom, if the second meeting is the second week in February, that's fine.
Hold a second. I just want to let you know, Darcy, I can never make 3 o'clock.
Well, I talked to Tom about it, so I don't know what you want to do, Tom. We did the hearing.
No, but for this one.
When we meet at the town hall, I can make it at 3:20, but otherwise I've got to travel home and I'm 40 minutes away.
Can we just set the continuance and have this discussion off record, Pete?
Yeah.
Good, valid point, Peters.
Let's do the continuance on the 14th. How's that?
That's great. Valentine's Day.
Meeting.
Well, we'll all have to be sweet to one another.
I have one special request, Arlene. Do you mind to send a written request for this continuance?
I'm sorry, would I what?
Can you send a request for this continuance to the 14th?
I'm happy to do that, but I'm the only one that you've asked to do that tonight. And I think consistency is important. So if you're going to start to do that, please do it with everyone.
Well, I think it's important because I think I mean, we all learned it from the past, history. So I don't want to mention that, but I just want to be careful of the continuance.
Well, as I said, I think you should do it with everybody. I'm happy to do it for you for this one. But if you're going to start asking, you should ask everyone.
Okay.
But I do think, Arlene, excuse me, Tom, that it is important that you go on the public record on the video asking for the continuance and that you have the authority to do so on behalf of your client, the owner.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, having gone on the record on the video, I think is probably sufficient. But
And you do have the authority to do so.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So could I have a motion to continue this to February the 14th?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Byrne,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. That's unanimous.
So see you in February the 14th.
Thank
And
you.
if there's a nice plan, please submit it maybe a week ahead of time so that we have a chance to look at that.
Absolutely.
We have one continuance. It's the Christian Camp Meeting Association's proposed dock and stairway reconstruction at 160 Lake Elizabeth Drive, Centerville, as shown on the Assessors Map 226, Parcel 137. This is continuing from December the 20th, and the applicants have requests for a third continuance to February the 14th. Could I have, without testimony, could I have a motion to continue this without testimony to February the 14th?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Sampu,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Byrne,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Foster,
Aye.
Abadili,
Aye.
that's unanimous.
We have one set of minutes, December the 6th, 2022.
I make a motion, we accept the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. Hearn,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
that's unanimous.
Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Abadili,
Aye.
Sampu,
Aye.
Moran,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hearn,
Aye.
Gilmore, aye. We are adjourned at 9:37.
Lakes, ponds, and streams. The Cape's groundwater